Settle in. Let your shoulders drop. Unclench your jaw, and let the day soften around the edges. You are here with Sleep Smarts, and tonight we're going to drift through something unusual. Something that sounds like science fiction, but was studied, mapped, and quietly documented by the U.S. Army in 1983. This isn't a ghost story. It isn't a conspiracy. It's a technical memo. It's an officer in military intelligence sitting down at Fort Meade, Maryland, and saying, "You asked me to figure out whether this thing works, and to do that I had to understand how it works." The memo was called Analysis and Assessment of Gateway Process. It was prepared for the U.S. Army Operational Group, Intelligence and Security Command on the 9th of June, 1983, by Lieutenant Colonel Wayne M. McDonnell. He wasn't just asked for an opinion. He was tasked to evaluate a training system known as the Gateway Experience, not as mysticism, but as something potentially practical, usable, and teachable. So tonight, that's what we're re-exploring together, slowly, gently, from the very first layer. Not hype, not drama, just what this document actually set out to do. The Gateway Experience, as described in that memo, is a structured training program created by the Monroe Institute. Its aim is to shift your state of consciousness, not in a vague, feel-good way, but in a measurable, engineered way, by using precise sound frequencies to synchronize the activity of the left and right hemispheres of the brain. The Army author frames it very directly. This is about getting both halves of the brain to work in tighter coherence, with more strength, more focus, and more stability, so that awareness itself can be nudged into altered states. That phrase, hemisphere synchronization, shows up again and again in the report. The Monroe Institute had a nickname for it: Hemi-Sync. Hemi-Sync is described as a very particular brain state, a state of consciousness defined when the EEG patterns of both hemispheres are simultaneously equal in amplitude and frequency. In plain terms, both sides of your brain start pulsing together, in step, like two instruments finally locking into the same tempo. Normally, our two hemispheres don't hum in perfect unison for very long. They trade roles. They compete for bandwidth. They specialize. The left half tends to do more of the linear thinking, labeling, sorting, narrating. The right half lives in patterns, images, intuitions, whole scenes at once. The report explains that the left hemisphere acts like a filter. It screens incoming information, analyzes it, assigns language and meaning, and only then allows it through to the more holistic feeling. Heavy right side. That's useful for survival. But it also means that most of us live behind a gatekeeper. The analytical mind never really stops talking long enough for the intuitive mind to speak clearly. The Gateway training aims to quiet that gatekeeper on purpose. According to the memo, one of the fastest ways human beings have found to slip past that left brain filter is hypnosis, distracting or soothing the analytical side until it loosens its grip, and suggestions can pass unchallenged into emotion, sensation, memory, and body. Level response. Under hypnosis, if a suggestion reaches the right hemisphere without being blocked, your left leg is numb. You feel peaceful. You can recall with perfect clarity. The body and emotional centers will often behave as if that suggestion is literally true. The brain routes it to the sensory map of the body and generates real numbness, or routes it to pleasure centers and generates real calm. The report is not hand-wavy about this. It treats it like engineering. Stimulus in, circuitry engaged, output observed. Why does that matter for us, lying here in the dark, listening? Because the Gateway system doesn't say, believe harder. It says, let us change how your brain is firing so different parts of you can talk to each other without interference. In the Army, as write-up, this is not presented as mystic revelation. It's presented as a neurological maneuver, and that is one of the most striking things about this document. The author goes out of his way to say, I tried not to approach this like the occult. I tried not to lean on dogma. I wanted to translate what is happening into normal physical science, biology, neuroscience, and even physics, so that the experience can be discussed, tested, and repeated without drifting into superstition. He literally says he wanted to remove the stigma of its occult connotations and put it into a frame of reference that could survive rational critique. In other words, if we were going to talk about leaving the body, expanded awareness, contact with information beyond normal senses, all phrases that will eventually appear in the report, we were going to do it in a way that keeps our feet on the ground. We'll hold both sides at once, the open mind and the honest skepticism. So picture this. You're in a dim room, headphones on. You're not asleep, but you're not quite in your usual waking mode either. Your breathing has slowed. Your muscles have gone heavy and quiet, the way they do on the edge of deep meditation. The sounds in your ears, carefully engineered, tones, layered frequencies, aren't tea music exactly. They read instructions, delivered as rhythm. The tones fed to your left ear and your right ear are deliberately offset, so that inside your brainstem they interfere and create a third, internal beat. That beat is tuned to nudge both hemispheres into the same pattern. This is brainwave entrainment. This is Hemi-Sync. As the memo describes it, the whole point is to increase the strength, focus, and coherence of the brain as electrical activity, to bring the chatter of the mind into a steadier signal. When that signal locks in, awareness begins to change. The body is still here, but your sense of you is no longer sitting quite so tightly inside it. Stay with that for a moment. The Army author reports that the gateway tapes are meant to guide you toward states in which consciousness loosens its normal attachment to the physical body, and eventually, its attachment to everyday time and space. That sounds dramatic, but the way he frames it is calm. As the hemispheres synchronize and the nervous system settles, you become capable of noticing layers of perception that are usually drowned out. You begin to access forms of intuitive knowledge that we don't too normally catch because ordinary waking consciousness is too noisy. Think about the way you sometimes just know something before you can explain why. A sense about a person, a sudden insight about a problem that's been bothering you for weeks, a mental picture that arrives whole and quiet, fully formed. The memo treats that not as magic, but as signal. It suggests that under the right conditions, you can train access to that signal. You can stabilize it. You can turn it up. And this is where the tone of the document becomes oddly hopeful, because the author isn't writing for spiritual seekers. He is writing to military leadership. He is effectively saying, if this works the way it appears to work, then there is a method, repeatable, teachable, for sharpening perception, expanding consciousness, and possibly gathering information in ways that aren't limited by the usual physical channels. He is very clear that he had to step into fields like neurophysiology, meditation research, and even quantum mechanics to try to make sense of it in language a commander could actually use. And that is quietly huge. Because usually when we talk about altered states, we talk like tourists. I had this experience once. I felt floaty. It was intense. Stories like that are interesting, but they are not a training protocol. What this memo describes is a training protocol. The gateway system is presented as something you practice, not something you chase. It's not a night vision quest. It's reps. You listen, you relax, you synchronize. You learn to hold that synchronized state longer, you learn to move in it, and then, only then, you start exploring. That slow, repeatable quality is important for another reason. It makes this feel less like altered consciousness, in the sensational sense, and more like mental conditioning, like breathwork, like physical training, but inward. The memo even points out that techniques such as hypnosis, biofeedback, and transcendental meditation can serve as stepping stones, not because they are identical to gateway, but because they all work by getting the body quiet and the mind steady enough that deeper patterns can surface. In hypnosis, you dim the left brain. It's constant commentary, so the right brain, as responses can express directly. In Transcendental Meditation, you focus so intensely, for so long, that you generate standing waves in the fluid spaces of the brain and drive energy upward, building a very particular internal resonance. And in Gateway, you add engineered sound to all of that, to actively pull both hemispheres into phase. Not just quiet, but coherent. So if you are lying there right now, listening and thinking, is this just fancy relaxation? The answer from the Army, S-own write-up, is no. It's just deeper than that. The target state is not ordinary drowsiness. It's a deliberate neurological configuration in which both halves of the brain are aligned. The body is deeply at rest, and consciousness is stable enough to move without losing itself. And here is where the document takes a gentle turn that I find strangely compassionate. After all the effort to stay clinical, the author pauses to acknowledge that people might be spiritually uneasy. Hearing all this, he says, in essence, don't panic. Exploring consciousness in this way doesn't have to violate your core beliefs, Eastern, Western, religious, secular. He felt it was important to say out loud that this isn't an attack on anyone. Sense of what is true or sacred. In other words, you are allowed to be curious without feeling like you are betraying anything. That alone is a kind of permission. So as you breathe and let your awareness rest just a little below the surface of your thoughts, here's where we are so far. A U.S. Army intelligence officer was ordered to evaluate a consciousness expansion training system in 1983. The system, the Gateway Experience, uses controlled sound called Hemi-Sync to lock the left and right hemispheres of the brain into synchronized rhythm. That synchronization is supposed to quiet internal noise, heighten focus, and allow awareness to move beyond its normal physical anchor, potentially even beyond normal time and space, to access deeper forms of information. And the claim from the Army's own internal assessment is not just that this feels interesting, but that it may be trainable, repeatable, usable. That's where we begin. First, the body has to get quiet. Not just relaxed, not just, I am comfy, but physiologically quiet in a way most people never actually experience while awake. The process talks about settling the physical system so deeply that normal sensory noise fades into the background, almost like turning down the dimmer switch on being in a body. Think of it as clearing the desk before you start the real work. It starts with tension release. You move your awareness through the body piece by piece, noticing tiny knots you normally ignore: jaw, shoulders, throat, chest, stomach, hips, legs, even the soles of the feet. And instead of forcing them to relax, you let them melt. You are not pushing the body to let go. You are asking it to. That distinction matters. This gentle scan is intentional because the physical body, left to itself, is full of micro signals: posture adjustment, heart rate changes, muscle bracing. You don't even know you are doing. All of that keeps you anchored firmly in the normal waking world. To go somewhere else, even for a moment, you have to loosen that anchor. As the body softens, the breathing slows down. Not controlled breathing, allowed breathing, the kind that becomes naturally deeper and smoother once the body stops bracing. When that happens, your internal rhythm starts to shift. Heart rate steadies, muscle tone drops, your nervous system drifts away from fight or flight and into rest and open. And that matters because in this framework, consciousness is treated a bit like a signal. Noise drowns out signal. Relaxation clears the static. Once the body quiets, the next step is the brain. We usually carry two styles of thinking at once. The left hemisphere handles structure, language, analysis, time, sequence, naming. It wants to measure. The right hemisphere is more spatial, more intuitive, more holistic. It feels patterns, moods, relationships, wholes. It doesn't T-narrate as much as it just knows. In ordinary waking life, the left side tends to dominate. Not because it is better, just because modern living demands it. Schedules, planning, parsing messages, tracking details, solving problems. The right side is T-gone in daily life. It's just not given the steering wheel very often. But here is the interesting part. The document describes a process meant to quiet the usual imbalance and bring both hemispheres into something close to a synchronized state. Instead of one side driving and the other side riding along, you aim for a kind of partnership, a blended mode. Think of it as getting both halves of your mind to sing the same sustained note. Why would you want that? Because, according to this model, when both hemispheres lock into a shared rhythm, consciousness becomes more coherent, less scattered, less choppy, more like a focus beam and less like a flickering candle. And that coherence, in turn, allows you to access states of awareness that are normally drowned out by regular inner chatter. Now, you might wonder, okay, how do you convince two halves of a brain to work together like that? The method described is surprisingly elegant. Sound. Not just relaxing audio, but specific tones delivered to each ear in a way that encourages the brain to generate a third tone internally. When two slightly different tones are presented separately to the left and right ears, the brain does, do you just hear them? It tries to reconcile them. It creates a kind of internal beat frequency. Your brain starts to follow that beat. Your brain waves, the electrical rhythms that reflect your state of consciousness, begin to drift toward that pattern. In other words, sound becomes steering. The idea is that with the right sound patterns, you can nudge the brain into very stable, very calm states without having to sit perfectly still for years on a mountain learning to meditate. It's like giving the mind a rail to slide on instead of asking it to float unsupported. As this happens, something else begins to shift. Your ordinary sense of me sitting in a body, in a room, in a location, loosens just a little. Nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic. Just a soft uncoupling. You stop being so anchored to the physical signals coming from muscle, skin, gravity, chair. Awareness starts to feel a little wider, a little more panoramic. You are still here. But your definition of here quietly stretches. In the report, S-framing, that widening is not a hallucination. It's not fantasy role-play. It is treated as direct perception of additional layers of reality that are usually filtered out by everyday survival needs. The argument is basically, you always have access to more than what your senses report. But under normal conditions, you don't notice because your attention is glued to immediate tasks, physical comfort, and whatever your phone just lit up about. But when the body is deeply quiet and the brain is rhythmically aligned, attention is freed. And when attention is freed, it can roam. From there, the process is described almost like a training protocol. Step by step, you are not just told expand. You are guided through it, gradually. First, you are invited to sense your body without moving, just noticing presence, noticing weight, noticing where the edges of you seem to be. Then you are asked to notice something slightly stranger, how those edges stop feeling sharp, how the border between me and not me starts to blur. For most people, this is subtle. A kind of gentle fuzzing out of where you end and the air begins, like mist-softening the edges of a mountain. That softening matters, because once the mind stops insisting on a hard, perfect outline around the body, it becomes easier to experience yourself as the field of awareness itself, not just the thing sitting inside it. This is where phrases like non-physical self, energy body, pattern of consciousness, and so on begin appearing in that kind of work. The point is to make you believe you are a ghost. The point is to break the habit of thinking you are only the physical container. If that sounds abstract, here's a gentler way to feel it. Close your eyes and notice the space behind your closed eyelids. Usually, we treat that as darkness in front of my face. But if you stay with it, there is a moment where that darkness stops feeling like a wall and starts feeling like a room. Spacious, not flat. That tiny shift from black screen to open interior space. Is the doorway. That's what they were trying to stabilize on purpose. And once you stabilize it, the document claims something important becomes possible. Intentional movement. Not movement of arms and legs. Movement of awareness. Think of attention like a spotlight. Most of the time that spotlight is pointed at whatever your senses feed you, what you are seeing, what you are hearing, what just pinged, what hurts, what you are worried about tomorrow. But attention can also be pointed inward, outward, upward, beyond, beneath. It can be narrowed to a point or expanded to fill a room, a memory, a feeling, an image that isn't physically in front of you at all. We do versions of this all the time without calling it mystical. When you remember a conversation so vividly, you can almost hear the other person's voice in your head. That's directed internal attention. When you're driving and suddenly realize you don't actually remember the last 3 turns because you were entirely absorbed in a thought. That is dissociation from immediate sensory feed. When a smell pulls you instantly into a childhood kitchen, that is non-local retrieval of stored experience. None of that feels supernatural. It's just how consciousness navigates. The difference here is intention. Instead of drifting accidentally into those states and snapping back, this method trains you to access them on command, hold them longer, and go further with them. You are not just having experiences, you are piloting them. So the sequence looks something like this. Quiet the body, so the physical anchor loosens without falling asleep. Findies use pattern sound to coax both hemispheres of the brain into working in sync, building a stable mental platform. Let the sense of I am only inside the skin soften, so awareness is allowed to extend beyond the usual boundary. Findie learned to direct and sustain that extended awareness instead of letting it flicker. Why go to all this trouble? Because, according to the analysis, once you become skilled at holding that expanded, coherent state, you can start doing very specific things with it. One of those things is exploring information that is limited to the 5 senses in the usual way. Call it intuition, turned up to 11. Call it perception at a distance. Call it deep listening. Different people name it differently. The document talks about gathering data, real data, from beyond normal sensory range. Not guessing, not storytelling. Observing. Another is accessing deeply stored material within yourself. Things you've experienced, but can consciously recall. Things you felt, but never put into words. Old emotional patterns, still shaping your reactions. In this view, consciousness, when stabilized, can reach into that archive directly, without needing the slow, clumsy shovel of ordinary memory. There is also a healing angle implied in all this. Not wave your hand and cure anything, but more like repairing internal noise. When your awareness becomes stable and wide, agitation shows up like static in that field. You can feel where you are clenched emotionally, the same way you felt muscle tension earlier in your shoulders and jaw. And just like you soften the body, you can begin to soften the mind. Release loops, release rehearsed fear, release the constant low, great hum of unfinished reactions you've been carrying for years without noticing. In that sense, the practice isn't only about traveling outward. It's also about cleaning house. And beneath all that, there is a deeper claim humming under the surface like a bass note, that consciousness is not a small local byproduct of the brain, but part of a broader structured field, and that by tuning yourself, you can couple more clearly to that field. You don't have to accept that as literal to appreciate its effect. If you simply act as if your awareness is larger than your current mood, larger than your current worry, larger than your current circumstance, your nervous system responds, your breathing changes, your sense of urgency drops, perspective widens, possibility opens. You're no longer trapped inside a single looping thought. You're looking at the loop from outside it. That, on its own, is already a kind of freedom. Now here is where the tone in the report becomes very calm, almost clinical. It doesn't say, drift and vibe and see what happens. It treats all of this like a procedure, repeatable, trainable, measurable in terms of how well you can hold the state. how clearly you can retrieve impressions, how stable your internal signal feels compared to your baseline. In other words, it frames expanded awareness, not as a one-time mystical event, but as a skill. Something you build the way you would build flexibility in a joint or in a muscle, something you can get better at. And that changes the emotional story in a really powerful way. Because instead of thinking, some people are just naturally gifted at intuition and I'm not, or some people have out-of-body experiences, and I guess I'll never understand that. You start thinking, wait, this is trainable, this is accessible, this is a protocol, not a miracle. You stop treating higher states of awareness like rare lightning strikes and start treating them like literacy, which leads to a quiet, almost dangerous idea that inner access is not a luxury, it's not decoration, it's not spiritual garnish. It's part of being human, and we simply let it atrophy. Stable attention is not the fun part. It's not the fancy trick. It says the foundation. It's how you learn to hold yourself steady in a bigger field without getting pulled under by distraction, emotion, or fear. And once you can hold yourself steady there, the door to the next layer opens. From here, the process stops feeling like relax and breathe and starts sounding almost like physics. The idea underneath all of this is that you are not just a mind floating in a body. You are an oscillator, a resonant system, a rhythmic source and receiver. Your heart has a rhythm. Your brain has a rhythm. Your cells pulse with electrical activity. Even atoms aren't too truly still. They vibrate. When you zoom in far enough, solidity dissolves into motion. Everything you think of as real is at its core patterns of energy in motion. Now, in ordinary life, those patterns are messy. Your thoughts race, your emotions spike and dip, your body tenses and relaxes in uneven bursts, your attention flickers between worry, memory, planning, distraction. Your energy, if you could map it, would probably look like overlapping scribbles. Nothing wrong with that. That's normal. But noise, in this framework, is the enemy of access. What the method is trying to create is coherence. Coherence just means the parts are working together instead of fighting each other. Think of a marching band. When everyone is playing their own thing at their own tempo, you get chaos. But when they realigned, timing matched, tone matched, something else emerges. It stops being a pile of sounds and becomes a song. Your consciousness is no different. The whole point of deeply relaxing the body, slowing the breath, using rhythmic audio to synchronize brainwave patterns, and holding a steady field of awareness is to bring you into coherence. Body, mind, attention, emotion. Instead of running in separate lanes, they start to line up, and in that state, something interesting happens. Your awareness stops behaving like a local radio tuned to one tiny channel and starts behaving more like part of a larger broadcast network. You are no longer blasting out random static. You are matching a frequency. You are getting into phase with something. In plain terms, once you are coherent, you can connect. Connect to what? Exactly. Here the language gets a little more expansive. It describes reality as layered, physical on the surface, but under that, structured fields of information and energy. Not imagination, not fantasy. Structure. Order patterns that exist whether or not you notice them, like gravitational fields or magnetic fields. Always there, always shaping things. You typically only experience the physical layer because that's the layer your senses are tuned to. Sight, sound, touch, taste, smell. Those are local instruments. They report local data. But those aren't the only channels. According to this model, consciousness itself is capable of perceiving, interacting with, and moving through the deeper layers. You are just rarely quiet and coherent enough to do it cleanly. That is the entire aim of the protocol, to get you stable enough, aligned enough, and open enough that you can shift attention from the surface layer to the underlying layer without losing yourself or snapping awake in shock. Now, Let's talk about what you are actually doing when you shift. The report treats consciousness like more than just what you are thinking about. It treats it like an active pattern, a field. That field isn't T-locked inside your skull. It's anchored to your body, yes, but not confined by it. When you are in a coherent state, that field can be extended, panned out, directed, focused. This is where words like projection, movement, expansion, and escape from physical locality start showing up. Those are dramatic labels for something that, internally, can feel very calm and surprisingly normal. It ends like being yanked out of yourself. It's more like widening. You are still you. You just feel larger. You can think of your normal waking state like sitting in a small room with the curtains closed. You can function just fine like that. You can talk, eat, work, sleep. But that's not the same as stepping outside and seeing the whole landscape. This training says, learn to open the door. Learn to step out without getting dizzy. Learn to walk. One of the key concepts used to describe what outside is the idea of a hologram. A hologram is interesting because every fragment of it contains information about the whole image. Break it, and any single shard still holds the full pattern, just at lower resolution. The claim in this material is that reality, consciousness included, behaves holographically. The whole is present in every part. That sounds poetic, but sit with it for a second. If every piece of reality contains the pattern of the whole, then your consciousness, as one of those pieces, is not cut off from anything. It's not sealed in. It's fundamentally linked. Access becomes less about traveling to a place far away and more about tuning to a pattern that already exists within you. That is a subtle but important shift. Instead of, I need to leave my body and fly across space to sense something, it becomes, I need to align with a larger pattern that my mind is already connected to and let information come into focus. Less motion, more clarity. In that view, distance stops being such a rigid barrier, because distance matters in physical space, feet, miles, kilometers. But in an information structure, distance is just difference. If two patterns are similar, they touch, even if they re-physically far apart. If they re-wildly different, they re-distant, even if they re-right next to each other in a room. That's why, in this model, it's considered possible to perceive something far away, or deep in memory, or even something that hasn't happened yet in your linear timeline. You are not throwing your awareness across space like a grappling hook. You are locking onto a pattern and letting resonance pull details into view. Think of it like this. When you are thinking of a friend and, seconds later, they text you, you shrug and call it coincidence. Maybe it is. But you, V, felt that little hum, that strange closeness that doesn't care about geography. That's the same basic flavor. This system is formalizing, not guessing, not hoping. Tuning. Now, let's talk time. The material does not treat time the way we do in day-to-day life. We tend to think past, present, future, neat, linear, all in a row. But that's mostly a convenience for the physical senses. Clocks march forward. Bodies age. Sunday rises. Sun sets. Linear time is good for keeping appointments and making dinner. But underneath that, time is described more like a landscape than a line. Imagine a terrain. Hills, valleys, plains. From where you are standing, you can only see what's east in front of you. Walk up a ridge, and suddenly you can see farther. That doesn't mean the distant valley appeared when you reached the ridge. It was always there. You just weren't in a position to view it. Consciousness in a coherent, extended state is said to be capable of that ridge step. It can get a higher vantage. It can sometimes observe parts of the terrain that would normally be future or revisit parts that would normally be past, without being stuck inside them, emotionally. Again, not magic positioning. That's also where the work becomes practical, because if you can revisit parts of your own past calmly, clearly, without being flooded, you can pull out pieces of yourself that got trapped there. Old reactions, old fear, old guilt, old habits that don't fit who you are anymore, but are somehow still running your life. And if you can get even a faint sense of where certain paths in your future landscape are leading, you can adjust your current trajectory more intelligently. You are not locked in. You are steering with more map. In this sense, what sounds mystical at first quickly turns into self-work. You start cleaning your internal space. You start making decisions with less panic. You stop living only in reflex. You stop letting your nervous system drag you around like a storm. This ties into another theme: intent. In this system, isn't T just what you want? It's the focusing force of consciousness. When you are scattered, your intent is weak. When you are emotionally frantic, your intent is distorted. But when you are coherent, relaxed body, synchronized mind, expanded awareness, intent becomes like a laser. You point it, and the system responds. That's why you are not supposed to drift aimlessly in these states. You form a clear, calm intention before you deepen, almost like setting coordinates. Not forcing, not begging, stating, "This is what I seek. This is where I place my attention. This is what I am ready to witness. This is what I am ready to release." That step matters because it keeps you from just wandering through your own subconscious noise and calling it revelation. It gives the experience structure. It gives it aim. Without aim, you are just dreaming. With aim, you are doing work. Now, if we pull back and look at the overall arc of this training, it becomes clearer. First, calm and align the body, so physical noise stops drowning you. Second, entrain the brain into a stable, synchronized rhythm so the mind becomes steady instead of fragmented. Third, widen awareness beyond the skin, so you are not trapped inside the tight outline of me equals only this. Fourth, stabilize in that widened state so you don't T-snap back the second you feel something unfamiliar. Fifth, aim. Use intent like a pointer. Sixth, explore, gather, witness, heal, adjust. Seventh, return gently and carry memory. That last step is important because without it, all of this would dissolve like a dream on waking. You've felt that before, a vivid dream that feels huge and meaningful while you are in it. Then 30 seconds after you wake up, it already evaporating. You try to hold on to the feeling, but the actual details just slide away. The training takes that seriously. It treats reintegration as part of the skill. You don't just snap back into your body and roll out of bed. You come back slowly, deliberately, while keeping the thread of what you just experienced. You anchor it. You label it in calm language. You bring it into memory in a way your normal waking mind can handle, because this is meant to be a one-off. Whoa. It's meant to accumulate. Each session builds on the last. Each visit strengthens your ability to get there again faster, stay there longer, see there more clearly, and act from what you learned when you were back in daily life. And this is where something surprising happens. After enough practice, the boundary between in-session and ordinary day starts to thin. You begin to carry traces of coherence into normal moments. You notice you are less reactive in conversations that would set you off last month. You find yourself catching anxious spirals before they grab your throat. You sense when someone else in the room is tense before they say a word. You feel when you are about to repeat an old pattern. And you pause, pivot, choose differently. That's not floating out of your body. That's presence. That's awareness, stabilized enough to influence behavior. So even if you set aside every big, dramatic claim and keep only what can be felt directly, you are still left with something powerful. A method for calming your system, syncing your mind, widening your sense of self, aiming attention with intent, and living with more clarity and less panic. And in a quiet way, that's the most radical part, because if you can do that consistently, if you can access steadiness, connectedness, perspective, and guided intent without needing anything external, then authority over your inner state starts to come back to you. You are not just reacting anymore. You are choosing, and once you can choose, you are harder to control, harder to provoke, harder to program, harder to sell to, harder to frighten. You become, in a very real sense, self-directed. That is not presented as a side effect. That is presented as the point. Now, once you start talking about becoming self-directed, we run into a different layer of responsibility. Because at this point, the work stops being just relaxation, and it stops being just curiosity, and it starts becoming agency. Quiet agency, internal agency, and any time you hand a person more agency over their own mind and their own perception, you're also handing them the ability to influence their own body, influence how they respond to other people, influence how they interpret what's happening around them, influence how they act. So, let's talk about that. Inside this framework, attention is treated almost like a physical instrument, not a vague idea. Not, oh yeah. Focus is important, but a usable tool. Wherever you hold attention, you feed energy. Wherever you place sustained awareness, you amplify signal. You've seen a gentle version of this already. When you worry about something non-stop, it becomes louder and louder and louder in your mind, till it feels like the only thing that exists. That's attention, acting as an amplifier, whether you're meant for that to happen or not. What changes with training is that you stop doing that by accident and start doing it on purpose. If you can direct attention into a part of your body and soften tension there, instead of tightening it, you just changed your physical state using awareness as the lever. If you can direct attention into an old memory without being consumed by it, you can pull emotional charge out of that memory, like heat out of metal. If you can direct attention beyond yourself, toward a person, a place, a point in time, and pick up signal instead of just projecting noise, you are stepping into what most people would call perception at a distance. That last part is sensitive, so let us go slowly. The claim here is that once you learn how to quiet internal noise, stabilize your state, and extend awareness beyond the boundaries of your skin, you can begin to access information that is not available through your ordinary five senses in the usual way. Not in the sense of guessing or fantasizing, more like receiving impressions, patterns, structures, sometimes spatial, sometimes emotional, sometimes symbolic, sometimes startlingly literal. Put simply, you can look without being physically there. Now, the moment someone hears that, they usually jump straight to spectacle. Can I spy on anything I want? Can I read minds? Can I see the future? That reaction is predictable, but it's not actually the useful question. The useful question is, what are you tuning to, and why? Because here's where the ethical side shows up. This method assumes that consciousness is interactive, meaning when you place your awareness on something, you're not a ghost. You're a part of the interaction. You don't just observe, you touch, you influence, you leave a subtle fingerprint. Even if you intend to be passive, even if you treat it like just looking. That means you are responsible for where you place your mind. If you aim into places you have no business being, you are not only crossing a boundary, you are stepping into signal that might not be clean for you. Think about walking into a room that's not yours. You don't control what S on the floor. You don't control what S in the air. You don't control who turns and looks back at you. Curiosity, without discipline very quickly, stops being exploration and starts being recklessness. So the training quietly pushes a different priority. Don't aim outward first. Aim inward first, before you try to map someone else. Learn to actually map yourself. Before you try to reach across distance, learn to reach into a memory that hurts and sit with it without flinching. Before you try to see something external, learn to feel your own fear response as a pattern instead of an emergency. If you can do that, you are not ready to stretch further without dragging distortion with you. It's like polishing a lens. If the lens is scratched, every image will be warped. And if you don't know the lens is scratched, you will believe the warp is truth. Now, let's talk about projection, because that word gets misunderstood a lot. In casual speech, projection sounds like launching yourself out of your body like a ghost on a rope. But the deeper description is quieter than that. It's closer to this. You allow part of your awareness to unhook from strictly local sensory input, and you let it stabilize in a non-local frame. Non-local just means not confined to where you are physically sitting. When that happens, you may still feel your body. You may still hear the room you are in. You are not unconscious. You are not gone. You are in two reference frames at once, one local, one extended, and you learn to shift your center of attention between them. At first, it flickers. You drift into the extended state for a few seconds, then snap back because your breathing changed, or you swallowed, or your foot twitched and pulled you into your body. Over time, and this is why repetition matters, those flickers get longer. You can hold the extended vantage with less strain. You stop popping in and out every heartbeat. It becomes smoother, almost like hovering. When you can hover like that without panic, something very practical unlocks. You can observe. Not observe like watching a movie for entertainment. Observe like scanning, calmly noting form, layout, distance, structure, pattern, temperature, emotional tone, movement. You just take in what is there, without naming it too fast, without forcing it to fit what you expect, without filling in blanks with fantasy, just to feel clever. It sounds simple, but it takes honesty. The moment you start trying to make the perception match what you want it to be, you are back in imagination. Useful observation requires very gentle ego. You have to be willing to say, this is what I sensed. Even if it's vague, even if it's not impressive, even if it does. Flatter you. That honesty is also what lets you test yourself. Because here is a quiet truth. This whole field collapses if you lie to yourself, if you make things up, and then congratulate yourself for being advanced. You are building a false internal map, and you will act on that map. And you will walk into walls, and you will not understand why you keep getting hurt. So part of the discipline is learning to separate signal from decoration. Signal is what arrived. Decoration is what you added. You notice the difference, and you label it. This part felt direct. This part felt like interpretation. You keep those separate. That separation is gold. That's how you avoid drifting into self-invented mythology. Now let's come back to the body for a moment, because the body is not just cargo in this process. It's an instrument. If your instrument is poorly tuned, the whole session will wobble. A tense jaw will pull you out. A racing heart will scatter you. A shallow breath will keep you jittering on the surface like a skipped stone instead of letting you sink. Your posture will matter more than you expect. Your position will matter. Whether you are too cold or too warm will matter. Hydration will matter. Sleep debt will matter. These things sound boring, but they were not. They were the physical gatekeepers to states people love to romanticize. Think about it this way. You wouldn't try to play a violin with all the strings loose and then complain that the song sounds bad. You de-tighten the strings first. You detune. The relaxation phase at the beginning. The deep, slow breath. The scanning of each muscle group. The release of tension from forehead to throat to shoulders to chest to stomach to hips to legs. That is tuning the instrument. Don't skip it just because your mind is impatient and wants to jump to the cool part. If your body is still buzzing with stress chemistry, you are not going to lift into a clean extended state. You are going to drift into anxious fantasy and call it contact. There is a difference. Let's also talk safety. People hear expanded consciousness, and they either get euphoric or afraid. Some worry, if I step out, will I come back? Others worry, will something else come in? You don't have to get dramatic about this, as long as you respect boundaries. There are two main safety rules in this system. First, you come back the same path you left, meaning you don't just slam yourself awake. You reverse the process with as much care as you entered it. You narrow gently. You bring attention back into the body gradually. You feel each limb. You re-engage small movements. You breathe more fully. You reconnect to the physical room in stages. That smooth return matters. It prevents disorientation, headache, emotional whiplash, and that weird floaty, detached feeling that can linger if you yank yourself out too fast. Second, you close. Closing is simple. You basically say, with calm authority, session complete. You reclaim your attention. You withdraw any extended threads. You let your awareness settle fully back into your physical frame. You affirm that your body is your seat. You affirm that your mind is your own. You affirm that anything you touched, you are no longer touching. Clean boundary. Some people like to imagine a kind of gentle seal around themselves during that closing. Not a wall of fear, just a clear perimeter. Inside this, me. Outside this, not me. You might think that sounds childish, but hygiene. If you wash your hands after handling raw meat, no one calls that childish. Same thing here. You are doing perceptual hygiene. Without closing, you can drift through your day a little too porous. You pick up moods that aren't yours. You feel heavy, and you don't know why. You get emotionally tired in crowds faster than usual. You feel almost magnetically pulled back into that expanded state while you are supposed to be doing normal tasks. Closing keeps your channels from staying wide open when you don't mean them to be. Now, let's address a quiet fear that shows up for a lot of people. But does always get said out loud? What if I see something I can handle? Here is the answer. Then you don't go that far yet. You don't lift a weight your nervous system can safely carry. Not because you are weak, but because you respect recovery. The point of all of this is not to shock yourself for the thrill of it. The point is to develop stability. Stability builds capacity. Capacity lets you go deeper later without frying circuits. If you hit something that spikes panic, pull back, narrow, reground. Breathe. Return. Nothing about this work demands self-harm. In fact, if you are forcing yourself through distress just to prove you are serious, you are doing the opposite of the method. You are reintroducing noise, trauma, and chaos into a process designed to bring you out of noise, trauma, and chaos. And there is one more layer we should sit with before we move forward. Underneath all the technique, the breathing, the entrainment, the coherent states, the extended awareness, the scanning, the intent, there is a philosophy of what you are. You are not being treated here as a fragile accident of biology, briefly flickering and then gone. You are being treated as part of a continuous field, a conscious pattern nested inside a larger conscious pattern. Your physical body is precious, temporary, and local. Your awareness is not limited to that local shell. That as the underlying assumption. If you accept that even as a working model, not as dogma, not as worship, just as a model to explore, then your relationship to fear changes. Death, fear softens. Isolation, fear softens. Control, fear softens. You stop acting like every discomfort is an existential threat. You stop reacting like every challenge is proof that the universe is hostile. You start to become calmer, not because you are numb, but because you are finally oriented. When you are oriented, you don't need constant distraction. You don't need constant noise. You can sit in stillness without immediately grabbing your phone or your next fix of stimulation. You can rest without collapsing. You can be alone without feeling abandoned. You can be quiet without feeling empty. That's the deeper gift. Because a nervous system that can rest on command, a mind that can widen without dissolving, an attention that can aim without shaking, and a self that doesn't feel like it has one breath away from erasure. That's a human being who is much harder to break. And in a world that profits from you being stressed, divided, addictive, reactive, and easy to steer, being hard to break is not just personal wellness, it's rebellion. So now that we've cleared the big ideas, what this state is, why it matters, why boundaries matter, why honesty matters, we can start talking about practical growth. How you actually build this, how you keep from spinning in circles, how you avoid drifting into "I felt something. I guess I am enlightened now," and instead become steadily more capable, more precise, more grounded. Because here is the secret a lot of people miss. This is trainable. It's not random. It's not mystical luck. It's not mystical luck. It's not some people are gifted and some people aren't teed. Yes, Some nervous systems start out calmer. Some people slip into controlled altered states more easily. But what actually matters long-term is not talent. It's structure. Structure keeps you from getting lost. Structure keeps you honest. Structure lets you measure progress in a field that tries really hard to resist measurement. We're going to lay out a few pillars of that structure. It's going to feel boring at first, and it's the thing almost everyone is tempted to skip. Dawn tea after each session, you record what happened. Not 2 days later, when your memory has already cleaned it up into something prettier. Immediately, while you are still a little floaty, before the thinking mind spins a story. You write down exactly what you perceived, in plain language, without decoration, without inflation, without apology. You describe sensory impressions. I felt pressure in my forehead. I saw a metallic shape at an angle. I felt a heavy, sad emotional tone in that space. I got the sense of water or damp air. I felt pulled further left, but didn't. To follow it. Things like that. Not, I traveled to an interdimensional temple where I met an elder who told me I am chosen. That may feel exciting to say, but that's not clean data. That's you importing story, archetype, ego, mythology, wish, fulfillment, all of it, and welding it onto raw perception. It might still mean something to you personally. It might even carry insight. But as far as training, you just covered your signal in frosting. Here is the discipline. Separate observation from interpretation. Observation is what came through. Interpretation is both can be written. They just can be blended. You can literally label them. I sensed. I interpret this as over time. This is going to save you. You'll start to see patterns. You'll notice, oh, when I get that low buzzing tone in my chest, that usually shows up when I am picking up machinery or electronics. Or when I see fast scattered flashes of color, that's not signal. That's just my mind starting to fatigue. Or when I get a sudden emotional spike that doesn't feel like me, and it sits like a weight behind my ribs, that tends to match sorrow from other people, not places. You start building a language. Your language, the nervous system, internal labeling system, that is incredibly valuable because this is the second pillar, personal lexicon. Like symbols mean the same thing for everyone. They don't. One person sees water, and it literally means water. A lake, a tank, humidity, condensation. Another person sees water, and it means fluid emotion, or movement, or memory, or unconscious material rising, or feminine presence. If you don't learn your own dictionary, you will misread your own signal. The reason you record your sessions is to watch your internal dictionary form. You are not guessing. You are not forcing it. You are letting repeated associations teach you what your nervous system is actually doing. After 5, 10, 20 sessions, I'll start noticing consistent pairings. The same texture keeps showing up next to the same type of thing. The same emotional note keeps showing up next to the same category of event. That's your lexicon. Once you have a lexicon, your confidence goes up. Not fake confidence, but earned calibration. You can say, when I feel this, it tends to mean this. And when you are wrong, you'll see that too. You'll update. You'll refine. You'll get sharper. Without a lexicon, you'll just float in vibes and call it mystical. With a lexicon, you'll have repeatable perception. Repeatable perception is the beginning of real skill. The third pillar is state control. You cannot skip this. You can treat state like an optional warm. Up and then expect depth. State is not just relax. State is select mode. Think of your nervous system like a console with multiple modes of operation. You've lived most of your life mostly in one. Alert, reactive, externally focused. Constantly scanning for tasks, threats, messages, notifications, demands. That mode is useful for working, driving, surviving, paying bills, holding a conversation. It is not the mode you use for subtle perception. You are shifting into a different mode entirely. Parasympathetic, dominant, low, urgency, low, friction, gently detached from immediate physical demand, but still stable and awake. You are not knocked out. You are not dreaming in the sense of losing coherence. You are steady, quiet, and extended. That mode is trainable like a muscle. At first it might take you 15, 20 minutes of breath work and body scanning just to get your system to settle. You'll feel twitchy. You'll want to move. Your mind will keep throwing you. Don't or forget to. Reminders? Your jaw will clench for no reason. You'll feel little jolts of adrenaline like static. That's normal. You spent years in alert mode. You don't just drop out of it instantly because you decided to be calm. But with repetition, that drop time shrinks. You teach your body, when we breathe like this, when we sit like this, when we release the shoulders like this, we're going into scan mode. And your body learns. You'll go from 20 minutes down to 5 minutes, eventually down to under a minute, eventually almost instant. That is critical. That is how you do this in the real world. Because if you always need a dark room, a perfect chair, no sound, and 45 minutes of preparation just to enter a usable state, then yes, you can still do this. But it's fragile. It's not integrated. The goal is to be able to downshift on purpose in ordinary life. Quiet in a noisy space, settle in a moving car, recenter in a conversation, widen without spacing out. That's maturity in the skill. The fourth pillar is boundary, but it deserves its own spotlight because it's the one that keeps you sane. Boundary here doesn't mean coldness, and it doesn't mean isolation. It means you know where you end. You know where something else begins. You can feel that line. You can feel that line. This wave of emotion is not mine. It just moved through my field because I was open. When people train perception without training boundary, they turn themselves into a sponge. They walk through the world absorbing every signal, every mood, every fragment of pain, every pulse of static. Then they wonder why they're always exhausted, always heavy, always overwhelmed, always needing to hide. That's not sensitivity. That's a leak. Real sensitivity is paired with control. I can open, I can close, I can sample, I can release, I can choose. That's what keeps you from confusing other people. Panic with your intuition. That's what keeps you from thinking. The energy feels bad. When really you are just picking up somebody else. It's grief and holding it like it. Yours, boundary, also keeps you ethical because you are absolutely able, with enough focus, to lean your awareness into someone else. That's emotional field. The question is, should you? And why are you doing it? Intent matters. Consent matters. Whether you like it or not, attention is contact. You don't put your hands on people without asking. Same with this. You don't go wandering through somebody. It's private internal landscape just because you are curious and you've discovered you can. Now, here is a quieter piece, and as one people usually only learn after they get themselves in trouble. Overreach kicks back. If you aim into a space, person, situation, or timeline you have no readiness for, you are the one who pays for it. Not dramatically, not with lightning bolts or curses. Nothing like that. More like cognitive noise, emotional hangover, sleep disruption, stomach tension, mood crashes, weird agitation that one settle. That's your system telling you. We grabbed more signal than we could process. We're still trying to digest it. Respect capacity. Build gradually. Take in only what you can integrate cleanly. Which brings us to integration, the fifth pillar. Integration is where you take what you've done in session and you let it actually change how you exist. Instead of keeping it in some special box labeled spiritual or secret or separate. For example, let's say you use deep internal awareness to scan your own stress habit. You notice, in session, when I think about work, my stomach tightens, and under that tightness there is fear, and under that fear there is this belief. If I slow down, I'll be abandoned. That's not just interesting trivia. That's a live wire. That's an instruction. Integration means you don't. Just write that down and move on. You take it into daily life. Tomorrow, when you feel that same stomach tightness starting, you pause. You breathe into that exact spot. You soften it on purpose. You tell your system directly, we are not in danger for pausing. You give yourself 20 seconds of safety. You wouldn't to have given yourself before. That neuroplasticity. That's literally rewiring your response in real time, using perception to intercept an old script and interrupt it with choice. That's how this stops being a cool altered state hobby and becomes nervous system evolution. If your expanded consciousness practice doesn't help you suffer less, react less, recover faster, self-regulate better, love cleaner, and move through the world with less panic and more steadiness, then what is it for? What are you actually training? If all you get is cool visions, but you are still anxious, still brittle, still explosive, still lonely, still acting from old wounds on autopilot, then the work didn't land. It floated. It entertained you. It didn't heal you. We're not here to collect special experiences like trophies. We're here to become stable. And stability, in this sense, is not numbness. It's not apathy. It's quiet strength. It's, I can feel this and not be shattered by it. It's, I can witness this and not take it on as mine. It's, I can choose my response instead of being dragged. Work and quietly becomes a way of seeing reality differently. Once you've experienced directly that you can move your state, hold two frames of awareness at once. Aim your attention beyond your physical outline. Receive coherent impressions, and then return safely. Your definition of you stretches. You stop believing the story that you are only your surface thoughts. You stop believing the story that you are only your current mood. You stop believing the story that you are only your past. You touch something underneath that, something steadier, something that doesn't panic when your mind panics, something that doesn't collapse when your body is tired, something that watches. That witnessing layer is not cold. It's actually deeply compassionate. It doesn't judge you for being scared. It doesn't insult you for being human. It just doesn't drown with you. It sits with you like a hand on your back, and it says, breathe. You are okay. Stay here. Feel this. You are okay. A lot of people go looking for that in other people, in partners, in leaders, in belief systems, in substances, in distraction. But you can build it inside yourself. And when you do, it changes how alone you feel in this world. Because now, even when you are physically alone, you don't feel abandoned. You have contact with that witness. You can rest against it. You can regulate off it. You can let it hold you steady until your nervous system settles. That's one of the quiet reasons this training exists at all. Yes, people get excited about perception at a distance, about scanning, about seeing without being there. But underneath the flash, the real medicine is this. You become someone you can lean on. Your own calm becomes available to you like an anchor. Your own attention becomes a healing instrument instead of a weapon you turn against yourself. Your own inner voice stops being purely threat analysis and starts becoming guidance. And when that happens, even just a little, you stop being so easy to push. You stop being so easy to sell to. You stop being so easy to frighten. You stop being so easy to divide against yourself. From the outside, nothing dramatic changes. You still look like you, sitting there, breathing. But inside, the architecture is different. There is more room, more quiet, more choice. And once you taste that, really taste it, not just hear about it, you understand why the work is worth doing slowly, carefully, repeatedly. Because this isn't about escape. It's about arrival. Arrival sounds peaceful, but it's not passive. It's not drifting off into some vague spiritual haze. It's actually the opposite. It's contact with the present moment, with the body you are in, with what you are actually feeling instead of what you are performing, with what is here instead of what you are projecting. And that level of contact does something subtle to how you move through the world. You become less reactive, yes, but there is another shift, and it's quieter. You become honest, really honest, not dramatic, not performatively vulnerable, not, let me tell you how broken I am. So you, LL, hold me. Honest as in, you can tell what is real for you in this moment without running from it or inflating it. I'm tired. I feel unsafe around this person, and I don't fully know why yet. I'm pretending I don't care, but I do. I told myself I forgive, but my body is still bracing. I say I want growth, but I am secretly scared of what I'll lose if I actually change. That kind of honesty is rare. And the reason it is rare is because most people don't have the internal stability to sit with it. They either lie to themselves to avoid the discomfort, or they explode outward and try to make the world absorb the discomfort for them. Your practice gives you a third option. Stay with it. Feel it. Name it. Not make it someone else's job to fix. Not make it your job to deny. That is power. Because once you can feel this is true for me right now, you can act cleanly. You can set a boundary without needing to create a villain. You can rest without having to earn it through collapse. You can say no without guilt. And yes without bargaining away pieces of yourself just to keep peace. That is what real access to yourself gives you. It's not about being enlightened. It's about being available to what your system is actually telling you without drowning in it. Available to the information coming in without fusing with it. Available to choice without freezing. When people talk about intuition, this is what they're usually reaching for. Even if they don't know how to phrase it, they're not asking for psychic fireworks. They're asking, can I trust myself? Can I feel what's actually happening instead of what I wish were happening? That's what you are building. And yes, there are dramatic edges to this work. Remote perception, deep, state access, timeline sensing, the whole frontier. But the deeper gift is spectacle. Sovereignty here doesn't mean control over everything. It means you stop being purely controlled by everything. Think about how most days normally go. For most people, something external spikes your nervous system, and before you are even aware of it, you are already in a mood, already in a story, already in a posture. Someone's tone hardens and you are braced. Someone doesn't reply and you are spiraling. A memory flickers and suddenly your chest is tight and you don't know why. That used to feel normal. That used to feel inevitable. Then you learn to drop in, even for 10 seconds, and scan. Okay, breath is shallow, jaws locked, gut is clenched, shoulders are up, heart rate is high. Thought loop is, I not safe. Signal located. Instead of just acting from that as if it were objective truth, you meet it. You soothe the body. You widen the state. You let the wave pass before you decide what anything means. That single pause can save entire relationships. It can save jobs. It can save you from sending messages you regret or saying things you can pull back or building stories that were never real. That pause is trained. It does not show up by accident. It's built the same way a musician builds ear, or a dancer builds balance, or a fighter builds timing. Repetition with awareness, over and over, until it is part of you. And that is the point we keep circling back to. This is not theory. This is not a philosophy to admire. This is practice. Practice becomes trait. Trait becomes baseline. Baseline becomes who you are in the world. You don't have to announce it. You don't have to brand it. You don't have to convince anyone of anything. People will feel it anyway. They'll notice you're not as easily yanked. They'll notice you can sit in discomfort without scrambling for distraction. They'll notice that being around you feels steadier, quieter, safer, not because you are inflating yourself, but because you are actually present in your own body, and not outsourcing your regulation to them. That has weight. And here is something else that starts to happen. Almost as a side effect, your sense of scale changes. Little annoyances stop feeling like apocalypses. Brief tension stops feeling like proof something is ruined. Silence stops feeling like rejection. Stillness stops feeling like failure. Why? Because once you've experienced what your awareness can touch, once you've felt how large perception can get, how deep calm can go, your nervous system stops believing that every small fluctuation is life or death. You have reference now. You've revisited deeper water. The surface chop doesn't scare you the same way. So you stop reacting to ripples like they tidal waves. And at the same time, you start treating real signals with more respect. You are not numb. You are actually more sensitive. In a cleaner way. You can tell, this is not okay for me, without talking yourself out of it. You can tell, this situation is draining me before you hit collapse. You can tell, my body is asking for rest now, not in 3 weeks. That is intelligence, somatic intelligence, energetic intelligence. Call it whatever you like. It is wisdom, and it's earned. We should say this clearly. Nothing about this path makes you above being human. You will still get angry. You will still grieve. You will still make mistakes. You will still have days where settling is hard, where the mind wants quiet, where your boundary is leaky, where you feel fried and strange, and you're not sure why. That doesn't mean you've lost it. It means you're alive. The difference now is you have a way back. You know how to sit, how to breathe, how to observe without merging, how to record without lying, how to cleanly release what is not yours, how to honor what is. And you will trust that if you give yourself a little space, you will return to center. That trust alone changes how frightening dysregulation feels. Panic stops being, I am broken, and turns into, okay, I am off baseline. I know what to do. That quiet confidence. That's what people feel in you when you've trained for a while. Not perfection, not invincibility, just steadiness. A sense that you can ride your own waves. From there, what opens is choice. Choice in how you respond. Choice in where you place attention. Choice in when you open and when you close. Choice in how much you take on. Choice in how much of yourself you give away. Choice is the opposite of being carried by every current. Choice is freedom. And under all of this, under every technique, every map, every caution, every boundary, that's what we're really talking about. Freedom inside your own system. The freedom to access deeper states without getting lost. The freedom to receive subtle information without being flooded by it. The freedom to feel without being destroyed by feeling. The freedom to rest in yourself. Because when you can rest in yourself, you stop reaching in desperation for something outside you to hold you together. You start meeting the world because you want to, not because you are starving and need it to fill a hole. That S, when everything feels different. Relationships feel different. Work feels different. Solitude feels different. Silence feels different. Even your own thoughts feel different. Less like a swarm, more like weather you can watch. And if you are listening to this in a dim room or lying back with your eyes half closed or already feeling that soft heaviness in your limbs, you can let that land for a moment. You can let your breath fall a little deeper into your body. You can let your shoulders drop away from your ears. You can feel where you are making contact. Mattress, pillow, chair, floor, and allow that surface to hold more of your weight so you don't, too, have to hold all of it yourself. You don't, too, have to force anything right now. You don't have to solve anything right now. You don't have to prove anything right now. All you are doing is noticing. Noticing that you can watch your body self, soothe. Noticing that you can guide that downshift on purpose. Noticing that you can rest without asking permission. That's the doorway. Keep walking through it.